Gilbert Gottfried, the razor-sharp comic whose voice could turn any punchline into a thunderclap. Richard Roundtree, the cool detective who taught us that style and resolve can rewrite destiny. Marilyn Monroe, the luminous star whose vulnerability and fierce ambition still echo across the screen. Michael Jackson, the moonwalking innovator who turned rhythm into a global language of hope. Val Kilmer, the chameleon actor who showed that every role can become a mirror of truth. James Earl Jones, the resonant voice that taught us the power of words to move nations. Why does Barack Obama still matter in a world that seems to sprint past its own ideals? The answer lives in the choices he made, the battles he fought, and the contradictions he embraced. A living legacy that still reshapes how power, hope, and responsibility intersect. Born in Honolulu in 1961 to a Kenyan father and an American mother, Obama's early life was a collage of continents, cultures, and quiet introspection. A childhood spent in Hawaii's surf-lined streets and later in Jakarta's bustling neighborhoods taught him to navigate difference before he even learned to read. Those formative years were not a neat prelude to greatness. They were a series of dislocations that forced a young man to ask, "Who am I, and what do I owe to the worlds I inhabit?" That question would become the engine of his public life. In the late 1970s, a lanky teenager with a love for basketball and a habit of questioning authority arrived at Occidental College. He quickly discovered that the campus was a crucible of activism, where the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and the rise of identity politics collided. Rather than merely joining protests, Obama began to write essays that critiqued both the complacency of the liberal elite and the radicalism of the new left. This early habit of nuanced analysis set him apart from many of his peers, who often chose one side or the other. A transfer to Columbia University in New York deepened his exposure to the economic and racial fissures that defined the 1980s. He worked nights as a community organizer in the South Side of Chicago, a job that forced him to confront the stark reality of housing discrimination, joblessness, and the bureaucracy that kept neighborhoods trapped in poverty. It was there that he learned a vital political lesson. Policy is a promise only when it can be felt on the street level. The frustration of seeing well-intentioned legislation stall in a maze of paperwork ignited a determination to become a bridge between the halls of power and the lived experiences of ordinary citizens. In 1996, after earning a law degree from Harvard and serving as the first black president of the Harvard Law Review, Obama returned to Chicago and won a seat on the state Senate. Rather than riding the wave of identity politics, he pursued legislation that tackled health insurance for children, expanded early childhood education, and cracked down on predatory lending. Each bill was a calculated risk, a way to prove that incremental change could accumulate into a broader transformation. Critics called his approach too moderate, but Obama saw the middle ground not as compromise, but as a strategic platform where bipartisan coalitions could actually move. The 2004 Democratic National Convention catapulted him onto the national stage. A 17-minute keynote speech delivered with calm confidence reframed the party's narrative from partisan bickering to a shared American story. he spoke of the audacity of hope, a phrase that would become his rallying cry. Yet he never promised a utopia. Instead, he acknowledged the country's deep scars, from the Iraq War to the widening wealth gap, and positioned himself as a conduit for a collective yearning for better. When he announced his candidacy for the U.S. Senate in 2005, Obama faced a landscape of entrenched incumbents and a nation still reeling from post-9/11 anxieties. He leveraged his rhetorical skill to turn personal narrative into political argument, weaving his multicultural upbringing into a vision of a more inclusive democracy. He won the seat in 2008, but his real test arrived just months later, a historic presidential campaign against a well-funded opponent amidst a global financial crisis. Obama's campaign was a masterclass in data-driven strategy. It combined grassroots organizing with sophisticated micro-targeting, turning small donations into a massive war chest that outpaced traditional fundraising models. Yet his victory was not merely technical. It hinged on a moral framing of the crisis. He told voters that the system was broken, but also that the American experiment was resilient if citizens reclaimed agency. The emotional resonance of that message, coupled with a promise to restore dignity to the White House, turned a once unlikely candidate into the first black president of the United States. The first years in the Oval Office were defined by crisis management. The 2009 stimulus package, the auto industry bailout, and the passage of the Affordable Care Act, ACA, were not just policy wins. They were decisive attempts to rewrite the social contract after a decade of deregulation. The ACA, in particular, illustrated Obama's willingness to confront entrenched interests. He navigated a Senate divided along ideological lines, employing a blend of political pragmatism and ideological conviction. While the law faced relentless opposition and legal challenges, it also extended health coverage to millions, cementing a tangible legacy that continues to shape American health policy. Internationally, Obama's tenure was marked by a recalibration of U.S. foreign policy. He ordered the operation that killed Osama bin Laden, a decisive moment that satisfied many who demanded accountability. Simultaneously, he negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, a diplomatic gamble that sought to prevent nuclear proliferation through multilateral verification rather than military intimidation. The agreement sparked fierce debate, but it underscored his belief that soft power and strategic patience could complement traditional hard power. Yet his presidency was not without profound setbacks. The rise of the Islamic State, the Syrian civil war, and the deepening partisan polarization at home revealed the limits of his influence. The 2016 election, which ended with a Trump victory, forced Obama to confront the reality that his vision of an inclusive America had not fully taken root. In his farewell address, he warned of the danger of an unchecked, unaccountable government and urged citizens to remain vigilant. Since leaving office, Obama has refused to retreat into the quiet of former presidents. He has authored memoirs that blend personal reflection with civic exhortation, launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative to support young men of color, and partnered with media platforms to amplify stories that challenge systemic inequities. He continues to speak out on climate change, voting rights, and the importance of a fact-based public discourse, reminding the nation that democracy is an ongoing project, not a finished monument. Why does Barack Obama still matter? Because his story illustrates the power of a calculated optimism that never ignores harsh realities. He demonstrates that a leader can be both a symbol and a strategist, that hope can be a tool for policy, and that the fight for a more equitable society is a marathon, not a sprint. In a political climate where cynicism often wins, Obama's legacy persists as a reminder that deliberate choice, persistent engagement, and the willingness to confront both external and internal contradictions can reshape a nation's trajectory. His ongoing presence in public debates, his mentorship of a new generation of leaders, and his continued advocacy for democratic norms ensure that the conversation he started in 2004 remains far from finished. As the United States grapples with new challenges, climate crises, technological disruption, and deepening social divides, Obama's lived example offers a template for navigating complexity. Listen to the margins, build coalitions across aisles, and keep the promise of progress alive, even when the road ahead is uncertain. The living legacy of Barack Obama is not a static monument. It is an active, evolving dialogue about what America can become when its citizens dare to imagine, act, and persist. In the end, the question is not whether his era has ended, but how the ideas he championed will echo through the next chapters of American history. The answer, like his own narrative, will be written by those who continue to ask, what does it mean to be a citizen in a democracy that still believes in hope?